She was in sales when he first met her. He returned home from college and spent the summer holidays with his parents. It was his first year at university, and he hadn't made the usual college escape to the beach. He loved his parents and decided to spend the holidays with them. Besides, in a sense, he owed them. After all, they were paying his tuition. The doorbell rang, and he rushed downstairs to open it. There was an angel there in glorious splendor. I'm carrying a basket with a cane, with an Avon badge. Hello, I'm Melinda, your local Avon representative. Mistress of the house? Ben was speechless. I'm sure. I'll call Mom. Mom, this is Melinda from Avon, he shouted up the stairs. That's right, Ben. Come back in a minute. Invite her to come in. Fine. Come in, Melinda. I'll take you to the living room. Ben showed her the way, and they both sat down. He couldn't take his eyes off her. She was impeccably dressed and made up as if she was going to spend a night on the town, not in a slutty way, but in a professional way, as if she was going to an opera performance. Her long brown hair was carefully tied back. The eyeshadow she applied to her eyes brought out the green of their eyes. It was these eyes that looked at him with a hint of amusement. So, you often silently stare at women, Ben, don't you? Melinda asked with a slight smile. No. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. Yes, it's Ben. You just surprised me. I didn't expect someone like you at the door. Oh, God. Didn't that ring true? When I say it, I mean, you really are very beautiful, and it took me by surprise. By this time, Melinda was having a hard time holding back her laughter. It's okay, Ben. I am usually greeted by women in the houses I visit. Most of them know me, but this is a new area for me. I'm expanding my area. I dress this way to sell my products. After all, I sell beauty products. She then stopped and seemed to look at Ben the same way he had looked at her confusedly earlier. This time she seemed a little uneasy. So why are you here? Do you go to Little Mount School? No, I used to do this, but now I'm studying accounting and business at the University of Perth. First year. I just arrived home for the summer holidays. At that moment, Mary, Ben's mother, entered. She briefly examined the two children and greeted Melinda. Hi, I'm Mary Jefferson, Ben's mom. And you? Hello, Mary. I'm Melinda, and I'll be your Avon representative, Melinda stated as she stood up to shake Mary's hand. Nice to meet you. I hope I can get you interested in some of our new products, but if not, I'll leave the brochure and see you again next week. They both sat down next to each other on the large chair, leaving Ben sitting rather awkwardly. This was a woman's business, and he was completely out of his league. The two women discussed at length the pros and cons of some lipstick that Melinda had magically retrieved from her cane basket. A similar process followed with a number of beauty products, which Melinda again took out from her basket. It seemed like she had samples of the entire catalog in that basket. She must have everything there, Ben thought. It must take some effort to carry that basket around the streets and still look so perfect. Mary intervened in his thoughts. Ben, could you get us some cool water? Melinda, I'll take it all, she said, isolating some of the food. Mary, usually you order them from me now, and I get them from my supplier. I will then deliver them next week along with the new catalog. I try to come here every week, especially during the school holidays. Ben couldn't help but think, will she be here again next week? Cool. The ladies said their goodbyes, and Ben led Melinda to the door. Maybe I'll see you again next week, Ben, Melinda said with a hint of promise. Then I'll try not to surprise you so much. Sure, Melinda. Sorry for my rudeness. This is... See you later. He closed the door before he could embarrass himself further as she walked back down the path. Ben watched her through the glass door frame as she walked around the gate of the next house. Her ass looked divine. In fact, she looked divine all over. She was dressed and made up to look like a professional, confident businesswoman. The anomaly was the reed basket, and yet she must be almost the same age as himself. He was 19, so she must be 18 if she wasn't already at university. Melinda seemed to suddenly stop and looked back at Ben's house. Did she just do that? Ben thought. She seems like a nice girl, Mary shouted. I think she will do well in this area. It's great that she carries all the products from the sales catalog with her. Sometimes it's difficult to buy something just based on a small picture in a brochure. I'm telling you, she has the poise and confidence of a real saleswoman and the appearance to match. Mary looked at Ben knowingly. Don't you think so? She was laughing. You couldn't take your eyes off her the whole time she was here. I think I even saw your tongue stick out and a little drool flow from your lips. This time she burst into breathless laughter. Yes, Oh, come on, Mom. I wasn't that bad, was I? Just kidding, son. Although she is very beautiful. I'm sure you'll see her again next week. She said she walks this area every Tuesday, in case you were wondering. More laughter as she disappeared upstairs, leaving Ben in his thoughts. Thoughts of an angel named Melinda. The week dragged on. Ben promised to take care of all the yard work while he was home. His parents also had a bucket list with many maintenance projects that he had to complete if possible. He attacked them vigorously. Although he was a bookish child in his youth, he was always there for his father when he was fixing something. This gave him a number of practical skills, which sometimes turned out to be very useful. At university, they called him Mr. Fix-It. Many of his friends came to him if their bikes needed to be fixed or their beds needed to be fixed. However, his own bed needed no adjustment. His friends enjoyed all the freedom of student life, dating everyone and sleeping with anyone. Ben concentrated on his studies. His parents worked hard to pay for his education, and he felt obligated not to waste their money and trust. Not that he was a saint. He dated some women and even had sex with a couple, but that wasn't what he was there for. He managed to keep his newfound freedom in perspective. He was walking up the stairs, hot and sweaty, cleaning the front gutters, when the angel appeared again. Hey, Ben, she said behind him. It was all he could do to keep from falling down the stairs as he turned to face her. Oh, hi, Melinda, he replied. Mom is inside. I'll go get her. He managed to walk down the stairs with some dignity and come face to face with Melinda. I surprised you again, didn't I? She asked with a smile. I promised I wouldn't do it this time. Sorry. Yes, you surprised me, but it was a pleasant surprise. Ben couldn't believe he just said that. She seemed to like what he said, and Ben felt more confident. After his mom and Melinda finished their business, Ben met Melinda on the way out. Melinda, I heard that the Extras Cafe sells the best cream donuts in town. Can I take you there one day? Melinda looked into his eyes for a brief moment, smiled the most beautiful smile Ben had ever seen, and replied, Why not, good sir? Here's my phone number. Call me next week. I'm pretty busy this week. With your rounds. She gave Ben a card, very professionally printed, with her details. Melinda Hines, Avon Representative, Sforzo 3178211. Ben took the card as if it were a valuable treasure. He was still looking at her when Melinda left the courtyard. A quick glance back and the same smile, and she was gone. Pretty smooth ride, Romeo, Mary declared. Mom, were you listening to that? Yes. Good move, though. She's a wonderful young lady. I see a very driven, hard-working girl. She'll go far, that much I can say for sure. I advise you not to miss her. With a loud laugh, Ben's mom disappeared into the house, leaving Ben confused but excited, holding the card. The first date went very well. Ben and Melinda immediately hit it off. The first date turned into a second, then a third, and soon they became inseparable. Melinda has always made it clear that she devotes time to her work. Many times Ben remained on the sidelines while Melinda pursued her business aspirations. It became a normal part of their relationship. Ben didn't mind. He truly admired her determination and tenacity in achieving her goals. The summer holidays are over and Ben returns to university. Melinda also went to university, studying business management and economics. She chose these areas as necessary prerequisites for a career in high-level business. She wanted to succeed. Her relationship with Ben only deepened over the years, and they both realized that their relationship would lead to marriage. Melinda's mother died during her last year at university, making it a very difficult time for her. Her strength and determination again carried her through it, along with Ben's emotional support and love. Ben started working for a local accounting firm in Little Mountain while studying business. Ben proposed to Melinda shortly before her graduation. Of course, the answer was yes, which made Ben's whole family happy. The wedding was a joyful event. Everyone present witnessed the love and devotion that these two felt for each other. "You got her, Ben," Mary whispered to Ben as he watched his bride interact with the guests in the hall. "Do the right thing for her, or I'll kill you." "Mom, there's no need to say that. I love her like no one else. Of course I will do right by her. You and Dad taught me to always do the right thing. What did you expect?" "I'm proud of you, Ben, and so is your dad. If he were here, he'd tell you this in person. You made a good choice. Now go join your bride." There were tears of joy in Mary's eyes as she turned and went to communicate with distant relatives. Ben reminded her so much of her long-dead husband. The next 2 years were tense for the young couple. Ben put in many hours to become a true professional at his job. Very professional, though. After such a short time, some of his colleagues hinted that he could start his own business and be very successful if he wanted. Melinda has also risen through the ranks in her career. These achievements came at a price. They were constantly tired. However, the strength of their love and common sense allowed them to cope with these difficulties. Often on Saturday evenings, they would sit cuddling on the sofa and suddenly start laughing about the past week. It was their way of coping with the stresses of each of their careers. Of course, regular sessions of tender lovemaking also relieved tension and reaffirmed their commitment to each other. It was during one of these sessions, or high-impact executive events, as Melinda jokingly called them, that they both started saying at the same time, "Honey, we need to talk." They fell silent, stunned by their synchronicity. Melinda was the first to break the silence. "Ben, I've been offered a promotion." "Wow, love. That's quick. What position? I also have something to discuss with you, but first you." "This is a senior manager position. My boss called me into his office today and couldn't speak highly enough of me. He said that in all his years of work, he had never seen such a dedicated and capable employee. He continued that the company was expanding to the East Coast and that it takes someone like me to run things there." She paused. Her green eyes only shone brighter with excitement. Ben's eyes were filled with tears of pride for his beautiful and talented wife. "My boss also said that if you and I want to have children, we need to do it now, because this position will require more and more of my time." Again, she paused to make clear the significance of this statement. "There are 2 years to prepare for this position, so." Melinda, this is wonderful news. I've been wanting us to start a family for a long time, and I know you have too. I know exactly when to start." The smile in Ben's eyes hinted at a night of wild love. Melinda melted in his arms. She knew that look and loved it. Even with all the joy and excitement at the news, there was a hint of sadness in Melinda's eyes. Ben noticed this immediately. "What's wrong, honey? Is there anything else?" Melinda looked Ben straight in the eyes and said quietly, "There's a cost, Ben. That means I'll have to split my time between Little Mount and Sydney. It will be a rotation. 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. I'll be away a lot, and with kids, it'll be hard for both of us, but especially for you." The last statement came with a deep sigh, almost as if this fantastic career opportunity wasn't going to happen. "Melinda, my love, it's possible. My news is that I was considering starting my own accounting firm that would operate out of our home. My boss blessed my aspirations, saying that although he would be sad to let me go, he could see that I can successfully start my own business, and that if I specialize more, he can pass on consulting work to me. Don't you see, with Mom's help, the children will be fine. I want you to fly, my wonderful, driven, talented little darling." Melinda burst into tears, silently sobbing with joy. Her loving husband wanted what was best for her and was willing to sacrifice a lot to make that happen. The night was a joyful, intense expression of their love and commitment to each other, as well as the excited hope of expanding their family. It didn't happen. Doctors were puzzled why a young couple like them could not conceive a child. God help them. They tried so hard that the physical act of sex itself became a chore. There were very few occasions when they actually made love. Sex was an act determined by body temperature, menstrual cycles, and the phases of the moon. They were given drugs and eventually stopped taking them. Finally, many medical experts came to an agreement. Melinda and Ben will not be able to conceive a child. It startled them both. They were exhausted to the limit. Melinda often broke down in tears, and many nights Ben simply held her as she processed the fact that she would never become a mother. Ben didn't know what to do. He consoled her when she was sad and hugged her tightly when she sighed bitterly. He, too, was pained by the thought that he would never become a father. This lasted for 2 months, when suddenly one morning Melinda woke up with a new determined look. There was a strong, confident look in her eyes that she held when she was determined to achieve one of her goals. Ben, I'm moving forward with a senior management job. I'll tell my boss I'll start next week. She finished her statement and looked at Ben strangely. He saw an instant change in her, and although it scared him a little due to her complete lack of consultation with him, he admired her for overcoming her sadness and once again becoming the determined, confident person he knew so well. He felt like this would be a new beginning for their relationship. But damn, this was what he signed up for when he made those important vows a long time ago. I love you, Melinda. Welcome back. You know I will support you in whatever it takes. She cried with joy, hugging Ben tightly. This hug lasted forever until, with a sharp intake of breath and squaring her shoulders, she left for work. What followed was a period of intensive training for Melinda and many comforting hugs from Ben. He started his own business from home and was pleasantly surprised by the positive feedback. By the time Melinda fully embraced her new role, he was well on his way to running his own accounting business. The extra hours Melinda had to spend on training and orientation were used by Ben to expand his business. Although their time together was dwindling, they both felt confident in their relationship. Both were very pragmatic people, which allowed them to evaluate their time together wisely without feeling left out or bitter. The elephant in the room has always been the issue of lack of parenthood. After suffering so much, it had almost become an unspoken rule not to bring up the subject. The future was their goal. Ben in his business, Melinda in her role as a high-profile executive. And then came the evening of the big announcement. They were both settling into a rare dinner at home when Melinda said quietly, "Ben, honey, it's time for me to spend time in Sydney." The boss said, "I'm ready to take on big things in this city." Perth is not a small city. This city is known as Australia's Western Outpost. It is the center of a huge iron ore industry, among others, located in Western Australia. But Sydney is where all the real action happens. Sydney is the center of all major export industries. Wine, coal, iron ore, sugar, wool, along with numerous other primary industries, all have their head offices there. If the company wanted to be a real success, it needed to have a strong presence in Sydney. Ben knew this, as did Melinda. They both knew that it would take a lot of effort from Melinda. Melinda, with her natural confidence and determination to succeed, approached the task with excitement. Ben, with his undying love for Melinda, took her challenge with pride. They finished dinner and began to prepare for the next phase of their relationship. Melinda will be spending 2 weeks in Sydney and 2 weeks in Perth. Between them, there will be a 5.5-hour flight known as the Red Eye. Ben accepted that he wouldn't hear from Melinda every night. The 2-hour time difference, coupled with her penchant for long work meetings, made this unlikely and was accepted by both. Months of this schedule became the norm, and they both calmly got used to it. Ben walked Melinda to the door as she boarded a taxi to the airport. They were both tired, exhausted from the night's sex before Melinda left. This sex was supposed to last for the next 2 weeks, and they both approached it with enthusiasm and passion. The phone calls between them were quite short and at different times, as dictated by Melinda's schedule in Sydney. These calls were enough to maintain a comfortable intimacy while Melinda was away. Upon returning, the taxi would arrive and Melinda would disappear into bed for no less than 12 hours after hugging and kissing her husband. The red-eyed flight always had this effect on her, and it was only on the second night at home that they again had passionate sex and then made love for a long time, restoring their intimacy and love for each other. Melinda then returned to her role in the company's Perth office. Ben's business by this time had a strong client base, and he was becoming well known among Perth accounting firms as a reliable and knowledgeable specialist in forensic accounting. Their lives went on as usual. Finances were great. Their group of friends was always there to support them and be an endless source of communication and entertainment. The children of these friends were happily accepted by Melinda and Ben to fulfill their unfulfilled desire to have children of their own. For this group of friends, their work situation was a little strange, but while they both seemed to be coping, no one commented. Everything was perfect. Until one night, 3 years after the 2-week watch began. Ben was at home finishing up some household financial matters when something caught his attention. Melinda has just left for Sydney. After all, he was a forensic accountant, and a well-known one at that. He noticed a statement that was sent to his wife. So, nothing strange, right? Except that it was sent to Miss Melinda Hines. It was her maiden name. As far as he knew, she hadn't used that last name since they got married. She was now Mrs. Melinda Jefferson. The statement was for a credit card, which, again, was in her maiden name and contained numerous purchases from restaurants, hotels, and clothing stores. The address on the envelope was Sydney. This address was crossed out, and it said return to sender. Ben looked at the address again and realized the letter had been forwarded to her company's head office in Perth, who then forwarded it to that address. He realized the Sydney address was wrong by 2 apartment numbers. The owners of this apartment must have known where Melinda worked and sent the letter there. Ben knew the apartment Melinda lived in while she was in Sydney. What a crazy mistake. The forensic accountant's brain didn't shut down, however. He saw the expenses that were listed on the card statement and analyzed them. Of the 53 expenses, 10 were on restaurants okay. Melinda obviously needed to entertain clients. 24 were on clothes okay. She maintained a professional wardrobe while in Sydney. She didn't take her wardrobe with her there and back. She maintained a functioning wardrobe while there, and the rest were various small purchases. Nothing strange. Ben looked at the clothing costs again. 5 of them were from a store called Dare to be Bare Almost. It was strange. He called the store online and was shocked to see that it was an adult store that specializes in lingerie. Alarm bells began to ring in Ben's head. Underwear? Melinda? She never brought home any new underwear. She knew that Ben really preferred to see Melinda in her natural form and wasn't particularly keen on sexy lingerie. But she obviously bought it in large quantities. This required a more thorough investigation. The next day, when the time difference allowed, he called the adult store. "Hi, this is Hillary, Dare to be Bare Almost. How can I help you?" "Hi, Hillary. I just received my bank card statement and would like to check on a few things." "No problem. Just remember that we cannot disclose personal information. What would you like to clarify?" "Actually, Hillary, this is at the request of my partner, Miss Melinda Hines." "Oh, you mean Mel? She's a regular customer of ours. Are you John? I've seen you with her around here a lot, but I've never met you in person. Mel is one sexy lady. You're lucky, man, with such a wide selection of lingerie, which she buys here. Next time you both are here, come and check me out. I have a new collection of black lingerie that might interest you." Ben was stunned, and his bumbling and mumbling on the phone should have alerted Hillary. "Are you okay, John? This is a really bad connection. Can you call back? Maybe we can get a better connection." The horn sounded for what seemed like forever. Ben carefully hung up the phone and sat down heavily in his chair. The facts were running through his head like a checklist. Melinda owns a wide range of lingerie, which she has never shown or shared with him. She is a regular customer, often shopping at the Dare to be Bare Almost store. She went there with a man named John. She was showing off her underwear to this John. She openly used her maiden name to own the credit card. Ben is an idiot. Ben felt a sense of despair and helplessness. Part of him, the part that loved and trusted Melinda, argued in his head to remain calm and that there was a completely normal explanation for everything. The other part of him, the rational, pragmatic, accounting part, argued that his marriage was falling apart. He was between two angels on his shoulders. He had never felt so indecisive before. Maybe a nice bottle of Margaret River Red will do the trick. It did not help. In fact, all it did was allow him to fall into a drunken sleep and sleep until noon the next day. Ben was a lightweight when it came to alcohol. He stumbled into the kitchen and made a sandwich, the contents of which will remain a mystery forever. He ate like a robot, completely unaware of what he was doing. His indecision resurfaced, and as he reached for a second bottle of promising red, he realized what he was getting himself into. He trembled and fell to the floor, overcome with such deep grief that his tears flowed unceasingly for an unknown amount of time. He didn't want to believe what the accounting part of his mind was telling him. The facts were undeniable. He needed more evidence. Holding back his sobs, he called the apartment complex where Melinda lived. He called the manager, whose number again he found on the internet. "Hi, Bruce here. Nightshade Apartments, Darling Harbor. How can I help you?" "Hey, Bruce, buddy. John from apartment 276. "John, what's up, buddy? You sound a little different. You forgot your keys again, didn't you? I told Mel that if you keep forgetting your keys, I'll start charging for calls. Just kidding. By the way, with such a gorgeous wife like you, I can probably understand some forgetfulness, you know what I mean?" He laughed. "No problem, buddy. What can I do for you?" "No, the keys are fine, Bruce. Just a weird question, but you've known us both forever, right?" "Of course, buddy. I've been here a long time, back when just Mel lived here. When you two got married, I was glad. Mel was getting a lot of attention, if you know what I mean." Laughter again. "You don't remember the date this happened? I mean, when we started living together. I remember our wedding date, but I'd like to surprise Mel, with flowers in memory of our first time together. You know what? This time Ben forced himself to smile. "No problem, buddy. Now let me think. You got married 2 years ago in January. I know because I hosted the reception here at the apartment complex. Heard something about how it was a 6-month whirlwind romance. So it should have been around June or July, 2.5 years ago. I hope this helps, John. I have to go." Ben let the phone slip from his hand. Facts. The list of facts grew longer. Ben should have written them down. Melinda owns a wide range of lingerie, which she has never shown or shared with him. She is a regular customer, often shopping at the Dare to Be Bare Almost store. She went there with a man named John. She was showing off her underwear to this John. She openly used her maiden name to own the credit card. Melinda began her relationship 2.5 years ago. She married John 2 years ago. They lived together in her apartment at the Nightshade Apartments, Darling Harbor, Sydney. Melinda is a cheating woman of easy virtue. Ben is an idiot, an absolute fucking a-class idiot. The sad enormity of it all had a mind-altering effect on Ben. Usually, he was a calm, reasonable person. Little bothered him. He was happy with his life and his relationship with Melinda, so far at least. Suddenly, he became aware of blind hatred. It was a feeling that was foreign to him. It was so foreign that when he realized it was growing in his chest, he physically trembled and felt his blood pressure rise. The scream he let out was so guttural and primitive that he himself was surprised by its intensity. "That low, cheating bitch," he shouted at the walls. "That lying bitch. How could she?" Questions flooded his mind as his body seethed. The first one was obvious. Why? Why did she do this after everything we've been through together? The second became logistics. How? How could she get married again when she was already married? How could she deceive the marriage registrar into allowing him to marry twice? Ben knew with certainty that his marriage to Melinda was over. He could never trust her again after what he found out. His love for her, as strong as it was replaced by a seething hatred equal, if not more intense, than his love. He knew he had practical issues to resolve. He had almost 2 weeks until she returned home, enough time to organize everything. He was happy with his working status. Working from home meant he could just change your schedule and allocate the time necessary to resolve all issues. The first thing is finances. Melinda apparently had her credit card under a different name than her married name, so Ben needed to split the finances into two accounts. He opened his own credit account and savings account. This seemed strange since he used to do everything in joint names. His business was the only exception registered in his name. He transferred all his money into a personal account and arranged to liquidate his business. He called each of his clients individually and explained the situation. To his surprise, most supported him and were willing to temporarily stop working with him, at least until he could rebuild his business after his impending divorce. He changed the beneficiaries of his pension fund to his mother. The next step was the house. He and Melinda were joint owners, so legally he couldn't do anything with it. He really wanted to sell it, but he knew he couldn't. Luckily, the house was paid off, so it would be a 50-50 split in the event of a forced sale. As for her things, Ben decided to pack all her things into boxes and get them ready to ship. The delivery address was where she was staying in Sydney. He arranged to send them the day before she returned home, so they would arrive there at least a week after she returned to Perth. She won't know where they went until they arrive. She will return to an empty house. Ben has agreed to rent an apartment in the center of Perth. He was closer to his client base and could continue to work there once the dust settled from the divorce. All his belongings were sent there and installed. It didn't feel like home, but it was better than the house that now brought back sad memories and bitter feelings in him. There was nothing in the new apartment that reminded him of Melinda and their past together. Now the legal issues. He met with a divorce lawyer and began the process so that she would receive the documents when she returned home. Ben knew the time of her arrival, since it never changed, and instructed the bailiff to hand over the documents to her. The last question is the bastard who married her. He deserved payback. Ben booked a flight to Sydney to coincide with her flight back to Perth. He hoped to arrive in Sydney before she arrived in Perth. He needed to do this so she couldn't warn John. Flight day arrived and Ben arrived in Sydney an hour after Melinda's flight to Perth. Perfect. She was unavailable for at least another 4 hours. He went straight to the apartment complex and asked to speak to the manager. Bruce met him with a curious look. "Yeah, buddy. What's the problem?" Ben told the sad story and showed photos of himself and Melinda at their wedding, as well as his driver's license. Bruce was stunned, to say the least. "Damn, buddy. This is a real mess. I don't know how I can help, but I don't want any trouble. Got it." "Bruce, you've already done a lot, but can I ask you one favor? First of all, is John in the apartment now? And can I go see him under some pretext? Maybe tell him that I'm a potential buyer of the apartment and want to take a quick look at his apartment because the one I want to buy has the same look. Will he believe it?" "Ben, I gotta tell you, mate, John is a really nice guy. I've spoken to him many times. He's friendly and seems like a real Aussie. I don't think he has any desire to be a bastard, especially one who could pull off such a scam. Just stay calm, okay?" Reluctantly, Ben promised that he only wanted to talk to John, and that was all. They arrived at apartment 276. Bruce knocked on the door, and when it opened, John was standing there. Ben was surprised to see that John looked almost exactly like him. There were obvious differences in the face, but everything about it reminded Ben of himself. His posture, clothes, physique, it was all like his. He had a kind expression on his face, and when he spoke to Bruce, his voice was calm and measured. This was not what Ben expected. He expected to see a man who exuded asshole. He was expecting a handsome guy with a hard, rough voice. Ben was confused. By then, Bruce had convinced John of the credibility of their cover and introduced Ben to John. "Ben, this is John, co-occupant apartments. John, this is Ben." They shook hands, and Ben immediately sensed the sincerity in John's handshake. It was warm, but strong. John, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for letting me look at the apartment. It won't take long. Can I have a quick look? No problem, Ben. It's a little unusual, but come on in. Sorry, the hostess isn't home, but she has an unusual work schedule and flew out this morning. Honestly, it's probably a nice break from the workday. Oh, what do you do? Ben asked, quickly looking around the living room. What he saw amazed him. The furniture was almost identical to Melinda's and his home in Perth. Even the photographs were in the same frames and in the same places. He felt his anger begin to rise, and he had to fight to keep it under control. He had a lot to learn first, and an explosion wouldn't accomplish anything now. I work from home as a software engineer. This is ideal for me as I could never work in a crowded office. Too many distractions. What about you, Ben? What do you do? Ben thought about making up a story, but decided against it. Look, we could be brothers. I also work from home as a forensic accountant. Like you, it's perfect for me. By this time, Bruce was starting to get nervous, expecting to see fireworks at any moment. Ben decided to get as much information as possible. I couldn't help but notice the wedding photo there. Can I take a look? Sure. Come on in. This is Mel, my wife. We've been married for 2 years. Bruce hosted our reception right here at the apartment complex. Again, sorry she's not here, but she has a weird work schedule, but it works for us. There was a pause while Ben studied the photo. It was Melinda. He felt tears welling up in his eyes again at the depth of her betrayal. To hide his tears, he quickly put the photo down and glanced around the apartment, even looking into the master bedroom. He was again struck by how much like home it was in Perth. Eyes under control, but anger still simmering, he was surprised that he didn't feel any animosity towards John. Everything about him radiated sincerity and friendliness. It was hard for Ben to hate the man. It was torn. Part of him wanted to punch that bastard in the face. Another part wanted to know more and understand how it all happened. He needed closure from this sad chapter of his life. Look, John, I really appreciate you letting me in. Can I buy you lunch? At my expense. Bruce, do you know a good place around here for something better than burgers and fries? Bruce was almost speechless, but managed to blurt out, Yeah, sure. Mario's Italian is right around the corner. You can walk there. The lasagna is incredible, and they have a huge selection of reds. Sangiove's. John knows where it is. He and Mel go there often, don't they, John? Right, John, let's go. Bruce, are you with us? No, I have to work, but you two go. This situation would become part of his bar stories for years to come. The walk to Mario's was quite pleasant. John actually turned out to be a very friendly guy, and it was difficult for Ben to maintain feelings of hostility towards him. During a light conversation with John, Ben decided to be frank with him. John, obviously, also did not know the true state of affairs. During the main course, the famous lasagna, Ben pulled out a photo of their wedding. John, you let me look at your wedding photo, so I think it's only fair that I show you mine. Take a good look. Ben carefully placed the photo down for John. Wow, Ben, this is amazing. If I didn't know better, I'd say it's my wife, Mel. They say everyone has a doppelganger somewhere in the world. It's incredible. He continued to study the photo. What is your wife's name? Ben would like to say, not a wife, but soon to be an ex-wife. Instead, he replied, Melinda. Her last name used to be Hines. John didn't immediately recognize the last name, but focused on the first name. Melinda, and my wife's name is Mel. That could be short for Melinda, right? There was a long pause. John took a large sip of red wine. Wait, is this some kind of joke? Are we on a hidden camera? Did you say Melinda Hines, Hines? Yes, John, I said so. We need to talk. The color drained from his face, which then turned red with anger. Listen, bastard, you're trying to tell me that you're married to my wife. Mel, you wife thief, you bastard. He jumped out of his chair in a rage and was ready to grab Ben when two large, strong arms grabbed him from behind. Mario whispered in John's ear, "Don't make a mess of my restaurant, okay? If you want to fight over a woman, fine, but do it outside. Got it. You enjoy my lasagna, but don't destroy my restaurant." All these other good people came. "Enjoy my food. Don't ruin it for them." John nodded. He was still red with anger, but he sat down reluctantly. Ben added sadly, "John, you married Mel, or Melinda, 2 years ago. I married her 5+ years ago. Look at the date in the photo." He looked. After looking at the photo and then at Ben a few times, the truth hit him. Ben had never seen a man slump into his chair as physically as John did. It seemed as if all the bones in his body had dissolved. The absolute devastation of his body was reflected in the emptiness of his eyes, which filled with tears. "Are you saying that she, Mel, married me while already married to you? That's not legal? Sorry, buddy. It's just too much for me to take in. I loved her with all my being. She was my world. How could she do this to me, to us? Why did she do this? When I met her, I thought that I would spend the rest of my life with a beautiful, intelligent, loving, purposeful woman. To have children. The doctors made it clear. She even showed me the medical reports. I loved her." At that moment, his head dropped forward, and he burst into tears. Mario was unimpressed, but allowed the obviously upset man to release his emotions. It was also in Italian. To make sure his regulars were okay with this, he treated everyone to free beer. He poured himself a generous portion of grappa, which he kept behind the bar. Showing such emotions was so masculine for Italians, and it reminded him of his own divorce. John's sobs finally died down. He looked up at Ben, who also had tears in his eyes, and said, "Ben, I'm sorry. You feel what I feel too. Forgive me for accusing me. I should be the subject of your anger. I confess, I came here to punch you in the face. When I met you and started talking to you, I realized that you, too, are a victim of this cruel situation. I was lucky that I had 2 weeks to process this betrayal. You found out it was just an hour ago." John's eyes took on a determined look, the one Ben saw in his mirror days and weeks ago. "This lying, conniving bitch must pay. We cannot allow such betrayal to go unpunished. She must pay and pay in full." "I know what you mean, John. In a week, all her things from Perth will arrive at your apartment. Melinda should be arriving in Perth soon, so be prepared for a call from her. The house we shared is now completely empty. I moved to a new apartment that she doesn't know about. I left no trace of the divorce papers in the hands of the bailiff, who will be waiting for her to return home. I advise you to do the same. She'll figure out a way to get back here as soon as possible to find out what you know." John seemed stunned by the situation, so over the next 3 hours in their apartment, I helped him through the steps necessary to distance himself from Mel. Financial matters were settled by the end of that day. His business could also be sold, like mine, under the same conditions. His clients were only too happy to wait until work could resume after their pending divorce. This seemed to be a more common occurrence here in the big city. He knew a lawyer who could prepare documents very quickly. As always, it's not what you know, it's who you know. To my surprise, the documents were ready for delivery the next day. Such speed was unheard of. John's lawyer must have really pulled a few strings for this to happen so quickly. During this preparatory process, John received his call. Melinda couldn't reach Ben because he blocked her number on his cell phone. There were several calls from unknown numbers, but he ignored them. She apparently tried using different phones to make the call. John looked at his cell phone and saw the caller ID. He hesitated whether to answer or not. Ben convinced him to answer, but not to give any hint that he knew what was going on. "Mel, what a surprise. You don't usually call so soon after arriving in Perth. Is everything okay?" John put the phone on speaker so Ben could listen to the conversation. "John, dear, no, everything is fine. Has anything unusual happened in our apartment in the last 7 hours or so?" "No. It's the same as always. Why do you ask?" Ben admired the way John carried himself. He didn't think he could handle it if he was the one receiving that call. It gave him a new level of respect for the guy. "Oh, nothing. Just asking. I have good news, honey. I'll be able to get back to Sydney sooner than expected. Something urgent came up at work there. I'll fly back Wednesday night. Love you. See you later. You know, what time should I expect? Bye." "Goodbye, Mel," John replied with a grim sense of finality. He didn't wait for Melinda to question his tone. He ended the call abruptly. They both sat there, lost in their memories of what they had both lost or were about to lose. They were both victims of the same woman. Ben helped John pack all his things. The packers he had called arrived and took all his belongings to another apartment, which they were able to rent with Bruce's help. Both looked around the half-empty apartment and sat down heavily on the remaining furniture. "You know, John, when I first walked into this apartment, it was amazing how much it resembled our home in Perth. It seems like this bitch wanted both places to be so similar that she would feel at home no matter where she was. Is that a bottle of good Margaret River red wine I see there?" John looked and smiled. "Yes, this collection is Mel's pride and joy. She spent months collecting it from Margaret River wineries, even as far as Mount Barker. This collection represents the best and most expensive red wines from this part of Australia. I think we should try at least 90% of this collection before we leave. What do you think?" "Well said, good sir," Ben replied with an equal sense of mischief. "Where do we start? From this Pinot Noir? I'm sure its lightness and fruitiness will prepare us for a richer Shiraz and maybe a Cabernet Sauvignon." The drinking began, and with each new glass, they compared notes about their lives with Melinda. The first bottle of wine, a fine Pinot Noir, saw them compare her dressing habits. How she always wore stockings under her business suits. How she always put on her left shoe first. How she straightened her blouse at least 3 times before putting on a business jacket. How she looked in the full-size mirror at least 3 times before she was satisfied. How the color of her briefcase always had to match the color of her suit. The second bottle, a fine Merlot from Swan River Winery, saw them compare her speech habits. How she always returned home with the same phrase, "Hello, dear. How was your day? I had the same busy day as always. I can't wait to tell you everything." How she always praised the prepared dish with the same words, "Oh my God, what did you do with this dish? This is amazing." How she always left in the morning with the same phrase, "Okay, dear, I'm going to conquer the world today. See you, and I love you." The third bottle of wine, a stunning Mount Barker Cabernet, saw them compare her love affairs. By this time, both no longer felt pain and were open in the most intimate moments with Melinda. The fourth bottle of wine, a deep Shiraz, saw them sitting quietly, eyes half closed, speech unclear. They weren't going to make it to 90% of the cellar offerings. "This bitch has to pay. I've never felt so depressed." "You're right, brother. What can we do to make her pay?" They may have come up with some kind of revenge plan, but as is often the case with excessive drinking as a tool for creativity, it completely erases the memory before the next period of consciousness. The next morning, they didn't look very good. Both Ben and John stumbled into the kitchen, where they were toasting Vegemite. To their credit, neither of them drove a porcelain bus until they got sober. It took them until lunch to be at least somewhat decent. It's time to go to Mario's again, this time at John's expense. Mario greeted them with a knowing look and a promise to give them everything they needed to overcome the obvious pain. Lasagna. He joined them after the meal and placed a bottle of good Tuscan grappa and 3 glasses on the table. "So, my friends, I see that you have sorted out your feminine problems." Bruce told him everything, along with anyone who would listen in the bar. "You know, I'm Italian from Sicily. We have our own way of dealing with such issues, but I don't think that would be allowed here in Australia. What are you going to do with this traitor?" Both Ben and John were amazed by Mario's straightforwardness. They had the same question. "What are they doing in your city that could be so bad?" "Oh," Mario replied, "the cheater is simply escorted to a waiting boat and taken across the sea to Libya. There are many rich Arabs out there who want to get a sex slave for the right price. We are renowned negotiators so that the husband receives fair compensation for his loss. The same thing happens to a prodigal husband, although the offended wife usually receives double compensation. He laughed, a deep laugh that you couldn't help but get infected with. Everyone laughed as Mario poured generous portions of grappa. "Salut!" he shouted, and everyone drank. Ben and John coughed and choked, causing more laughter, followed by another generous pour. "Always catch the snake where it thinks it's safe," Mario said suddenly. "Where does this snake think it's safe?" Ben and John looked at each other and then at Mario's grim face. They said at the same time, "At work." "Then we should cut off her head there," said Mario, pouring the grappa again. A detailed discussion ensued about how to create maximum pain at work for Melinda. Work was everything to her, while she was everything to Ben and John. She betrayed their trust and love at the highest level, and now it is her turn to be betrayed at the highest level. The lawyer Ben hired was in Perth, but provided a colleague here in Sydney who could handle the work needed. Basically, both Ben and John wanted to sue Melinda for damages caused by her being married to two people at the same time. In New South Wales, Section 92 of the Crimes Act 19 makes it an offence, punishable by a maximum of 7 years imprisonment, to marry one person while already married to another. This is known as bigamy. This betrayal committed by Melinda was a criminal offence that had to be tried in criminal court before a civil lawsuit could be filed. The criminal element had to be resolved first. It was John's job as Bill's lawyer. He happily accepted the assignment from his lawyer friend Ben. He hadn't seen such a clear case of bigamy in years. Melinda's company, so keen to establish itself among the big businesses in Sydney, will not be happy with having a convicted criminal in its top ranks. John's lawyer was also on standby, ready to sue Melinda for civil damages. All legal issues have been resolved. What they both feared, but both needed, was closure with Melinda. The meeting was inevitable. Her flight was due to arrive in an hour. Both Ben and John prepared the apartment. Napkins, wine, and coffee were provided, along with a recording device hidden among the modest furniture. The wine was mainly for Ben and John. When she arrived, John met her at the door as usual. "Hi, dear. I am so glad to see you. Work is a mess, and the boss let me go home so quickly." She hugged John as usual and entered the room. Ben winced at Melinda's obvious display of affection for John. It was the same way she usually greeted him. The pain of the situation came back to him. He almost held back a quiet sob. At first, Melinda didn't notice who was there, but the modesty of the room drew her attention to the impending scenario. "What the hell? What did you do with the apartment? Where are all your things?" She looked around the room again and saw Ben for the first time. "Oh shit, oh holy hell, Ben, what are you doing here? I tried to call you while I was in Perth, honey, but—" She turned pale, her knees shaking. Her usually deep green eyes took on a hazy look. She didn't know where to look. She fell silent, realizing the reality of what was happening. The tears began to flow, and the sobs were genuine, but neither Ben nor John were impressed. They waited gloomily for her to pull herself together. "I can explain everything," she sobbed. They were waiting. "Ben, John, she began. "We just want the truth, please," Ben said. "Not that it will change the consequences of this betrayal, but please just explain why. Why did you betray our years of marriage to deceive another man into believing he was the only one? Why? Just why?" Melinda took a deep breath. The game was over. She was backed into a corner, and to her credit, she didn't try to come up with a new lie for either of them. Her determination, usually an admirable character trait, allowed her to tell the truth. "I loved you both. I still love you both. Ben, when I left for this job, I honestly thought we could survive being apart for 2 weeks. I didn't expect that the fact that I would never be able to give birth to a child would be so devastating. I felt like I let you down. She failed me as a wife and as a future mother. I missed you so much, Ben, but I didn't want to admit my weakness. My pride would not allow me to give up. I knew you were the one for me. You always have been. but I needed to be stronger. I needed to succeed in this despite my feelings. I realized soon after that this ego and determination was only driving me deeper and deeper into the pit of despair. I don't know how I managed to hide it when I was with you again in Perth, but I did it. I focused that despair on my work and felt a little relief that it filled the void. My job kept me busy interviewing new employees like John. When I first met him, I was struck by how much like you he was, Ben. I was drawn to John like a magnet. He had the same mannerisms, the same style of clothing. Hell, even his walk was like yours. My loneliness for you, Ben, only grew stronger every time I saw John. Over time, it seemed that the two of you had merged into one being, my loving husband. John, remember all those so-called follow-up interviews for your role as a software developer at our company? Only one thing was needed. I knew you were right for the job after the first interview. The rest were only for my benefit. I was as passionate about you as I was about my first husband, Ben. I thought I didn't need to feel this loneliness anymore. I willingly made a move on you, John. Part of me knew it was wrong, but I was too weak to say no. But you were already married, Melinda. Married to me. I was completely devoted to you. Why did you need someone else to take my place? Ben sighed. I don't know, Ben, my dear. I just knew I could. I missed you very much, but my pride would not allow me to return home and admit it to you. I couldn't let go of John. John, I honestly loved you and still do. You are so similar to Ben that it seemed like you were his clone. How could I not love you too? Ben, I loved you and still love you. I don't know how I can make up for this with both of you. I can't choose between you. I need and cherish both. More sobs and tears. The napkins were brought, but the sternness and composure of Ben and John remained. When she regained her composure, Melinda looked at both men. She saw the harshness and loss of love in their eyes. She realized that she had lost the love of both men whom she had so cruelly betrayed. She had nothing more to say. Her betrayal was laid bare for all to see. The pragmatic part of her psyche took over. No amount of tears and begging would have changed her fate. She knew it. The dice were rolled and the game started. She had to accept what was coming. Her body seemed to shrink as she accepted her fate. Ben added, "There's only one thing I can say, Melinda. You betrayed me and put our love and trust aside just because you thought you could. All those moments when I consoled you, supported you, was there for you during these difficult times, all of it was swept away like trash. I will never forgive you for what you did. I will never forget this either. You destroyed an important part of my consciousness. My ability to trust those I love and will love in the future is destroyed thanks to your selfish actions. I hope and pray that I can recover from this poison in my soul and live a satisfying life. Thanks for nothing. John, brother, you know where to find me." He got up and left without a word. Melinda began to cry again and hugged herself, trying to find comfort. "John," she began. Her pleading eyes reflected the desperation she felt. Could she at least find solace with one of the men she had so cruelly betrayed? John interrupted her. "Don't, Mel. Don't even try to justify what you did. You've ruined a wonderful part of Ben's character, and mine as well. I thought you were my whole world. When you came into my life, I thought I had found my happiness. I loved you so much. When you explained your work schedule, I accepted it easily. I accepted this because I loved and trusted you. I would give my life for you, Mel. What is a short separation time of 2 weeks compared to this? Like Ben, I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust anyone the same way again. You know what they say, once bitten, twice careful. Goodbye, Mel. Enjoy your future, but know that neither Ben nor I will be part of that future." John went out and left the door open. Melinda collapsed on the floor and remained there until late in the evening. The devastation that she felt in her soul was reflected in the dull atmosphere of the almost empty room of the apartment. When she came to her senses, she did not know what to do, because everything she did from that moment was in a fog. Concerned neighbors, seeing the open entrance to apartment 276 and Mel, a woman they sometimes saw lying on the sofa quietly sobbing, called an ambulance. Paramedics took her to Sydney's North Shore Hospital, where she remained under observation. Ben flew to Perth on the next available flight. He never visited Sydney again. This city held only sad memories for him. Fortunately, the divorce went through without opposition, and 6 months later he received a divorce decree by mail, the final nail in the coffin of his marriage. His mother remained perplexed by this whole sad story. She often told everyone, "I like this girl. What happened?" John also finalized his divorce. This happened faster as the court ruled that his marriage to Mel was invalid from the start. Melinda's boss received a legal letter informing him of the situation involving his protege's strange behavior. This was enough for the company to fire Melinda immediately, but not enough to stop the lawsuit filed by both Ben and John regarding their alleged approval of this bigamy. The company settled the case out of court. Melinda was convicted in the Supreme Court of Perth of 1 count of bigamy and sentenced to 5 years in Sydney's Long Bay prison. Both Ben and John restarted their businesses with startup funds provided by a successful civil suit. They remain good friends to this day and often meet at Uluru, the midpoint between Perth and Sydney. They call each other good bastards. Both Bruce and Mario love to retell the tale of 2 husbands to anyone and everyone who will listen. None of the participants in this sad story heard from Melinda again.